There is a kind of thinking that never actually stops. It moves in loops. It revisits the same conversation, the same decision, the same moment, over and over, as if repetition alone could settle something. As if going over it one more time might finally produce the answer that all the previous times couldn't. Most people call it overthinking, and most people treat it like a flaw, like a habit they should break, or a weakness they should be ashamed of. But here is something worth sitting with for a moment. What if the thinking isn't the problem? What if it's actually doing something? Something very specific that the mind believes it needs? Because if you look closely at the moments when the loop starts, when the mind latches on and refuses to let go, there's almost always something underneath it. Not confusion, not curiosity. Something closer to fear. And the thinking, all of it, the rounds and rounds of it, is a quiet attempt to outthink that fear. To stay one step ahead of whatever might happen next. That is what this episode is about. He had been offered a position at a different company. Not dramatically better. Not worse either, just different. A slight change in direction, a new set of people, an unfamiliar structure. The kind of opportunity that arrives not with a trumpet, but with a quiet knock. He had 2 weeks to decide. By the end of the first week, he hadn't slept well a single night. It wasn't that he couldn't think through the decision. He could. He had made a list of pros and cons on the third day, filled it out carefully, looked at it for a long time, and then folded it and put it in a drawer. The list hadn't helped. Not because the answers weren't there, but because the answers weren't really what he was looking for. What he was actually looking for was certainty. He wanted to know before committing how it would go, whether the new people would respect him, whether the work would feel meaningful 6 months in, whether leaving his current role would turn out to be something he regretted. He wanted some version of the future to reach back and give him permission, and since it couldn't, he kept thinking. At the kitchen table in the morning, his coffee going cold while he stared at nothing. On the drive to work, rehearsing imaginary conversations, what he would say if he accepted, what he would say if he didn't. Late at night, lying still while his mind ran through scenarios that kept branching into more scenarios. He told himself this was careful thinking. Responsible thinking, that a person should take time with a decision like this, and some part of that was true. But most of it, the looping, the rehearsing, the scenario running, wasn't analysis. It was something else. By the end of the second week, he had talked himself into the decision 3 or 4 times, and back out of it just as many. Not because new information had arrived, the information hadn't changed. What changed was his emotional temperature, which rose and fell with the time of day, with how tired he was, with whether the last conversation he'd had with a colleague had gone well or poorly. In the morning, when his mind was still quiet, the new role felt possible, even exciting. By the afternoon, after the noise of the day had accumulated, it felt reckless. By evening, it felt like a mistake he hadn't made yet but already regretted. He was not making a decision. He was tracking his own anxiety. His thinking had become reactive, circular, detached from any real logic. And the frustrating part was that he could see this, could feel the pointlessness of it, and still couldn't stop. There was a version of this decision he could handle. The version where he knew the outcome, where he could confirm in advance that he was making the right call, where someone, some future version of himself, could reach back through time and say, "Take it, it works out," or "Don't, you would have regretted it." He just wanted the answer. Not the process of arriving at it, but that version didn't exist, and something in him kept searching for it anyway. He started asking people around him for their opinions. His sister first, then a friend from his last job, then reluctantly, his old manager, someone he respected but hadn't spoken to in over a year. He framed each conversation carefully, presenting the situation as if he were genuinely open to input. But he wasn't, really. Not in the way he was pretending. What he was actually looking for was not advice. He was looking for permission. For someone, with the right authority or the right confidence, to say the words that would finally settle him. He hoped that the certainty he couldn't manufacture for himself might live inside someone else, and that asking enough people would eventually surface it. His sister said to take it. His old manager said to wait. Neither answer satisfied him. He thanked them, ended the conversations, and went back to thinking. There were moments, brief ones, where he caught himself mid-loop and felt something close to shame, not the dramatic kind. Just a quiet, flat recognition that he had been circling the same question for 10 days and had gotten no closer to anything real. That the thinking, which had felt productive for the first few days, had long since crossed into something else. Something that looked like diligence from the outside but felt, from the inside, like a dog running in a yard, wearing a groove into the same patch of grass. In those moments he felt a strange exhaustion. Not the exhaustion of hard work, not the satisfying heaviness of effort well spent. Something duller. The exhaustion of gripping something tightly for too long, not because the grip was necessary, but because letting go felt dangerous. He didn't name it yet, he didn't recognize it for what it was, but something in his body knew. His shoulders were up, his jaw was tight, his sleep, when it came, was shallow. These weren't symptoms of a hard decision. They were symptoms of sustained tension, the physical trace of a mind that had been clenching around something it couldn't hold. The realization came on a Thursday morning, without drama. He arrived at the office before anyone else. The lights were still on their automatic dim setting, and the room had that particular quality of early silence, not peaceful exactly, but neutral, unused. He set his bag down, got coffee, and sat at his desk without turning on his computer. He opened his phone out of habit and found himself in the Notes app. There was a note he didn't remember writing, something typed out 2 days earlier, somewhere between midnight and 1 a.m., in a state that was not quite asleep and not quite awake. It was short, a paragraph, maybe less. I keep trying to figure out what's going to happen, but I can't figure that out. Nobody can. I can't think my way into knowing. So I just keep running in circles trying to control something that I actually can't control. And the circle isn't getting me anywhere. It's just making me tired. He read it once, then again. He didn't feel like he had discovered something profound. He felt, more than anything, tired, and a little embarrassed. Not because he had been doing something wrong, but because he could see, in those clumsy late-night sentences, how plainly he had already understood what was happening. The knowledge had been there. He had even written it down, and still the loop had continued. He had been trying to think his way into a future that hadn't been decided yet. He had been treating thought as if it were a tool strong enough to bend uncertainty into something solid, as if, with enough effort, the not yet known could be forced into clarity, as if the future owed him an answer before he had to give one. It didn't. He put his phone face down on the desk and sat for a moment, very still. The room was quiet. Somewhere down the hall, a door opened and closed. Something in the loop loosened. Not the decision. That was still ahead of him, unchanged, but the compulsion to keep rotating around it, that eased, just slightly, like pressure releasing from a joint that has been held at the wrong angle for too long. It didn't fix anything, but it shifted something. He recognized, in a way that felt less like insight and more like simple tiredness, that he had spent 2 weeks fighting a constraint that was not going to change. The future was not going to reveal itself early. The certainty was not going to arrive, and all the loops in the world would not change that. He had known this the whole time. He had just been hoping he was wrong. There is a framework, more than 2,000 years old, that gets at exactly what was happening in that office, in that exhausted, quiet man reading his own words back to himself. It comes from Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher who, for much of his life, had no control over almost anything. He was born into slavery. He did not choose his location, his work, his circumstances, who owned his time or how it was spent. His life, in its external structure, was almost entirely outside his own authority. And from that position, not despite it, but partly because of it, he arrived at one of the clearest ideas in the history of human thought. He called it the Dichotomy of Control. The idea is this: some things are within our power, and some things are not. What is within our power includes our choices, our responses, our attention, our interpretation of events, our values, the effort we direct toward what we can actually influence. What is not within our power includes outcomes, other people's reactions, circumstances we didn't create, and most relevantly here, the future in all its forms. That is the line. And Epictetus believed that almost all human suffering comes from one source: crossing it. From pouring effort, attention, and anxiety into the territory on the other side, the territory that was never ours to manage. What this man had been doing for 2 weeks was not careless. It was not lazy. It was, in many ways, the behavior of someone who cared deeply. But caring deeply and directing that care well are not the same thing. He had not been analyzing what was within his power. He had been trying to determine what would happen. And those two things look almost identical from the outside. From the inside, they are entirely different experiences. Analyzing a decision that is yours to make sounds like, what do I know about this opportunity? What matters to me about my work? What am I actually willing to commit to? What choice reflects who I am and what I value? Overthinking sounds like, but what if it doesn't work out? What if I regret it? What if I take it and the team is difficult? Or I leave and my current role improves right after I go? The first set of questions has answers. Imperfect ones, maybe, but real ones, accessible with reflection. The second set of questions has no answers. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Not in the way the mind wants them. Because they are questions about the future, and the future has not happened. Epictetus would say, stop asking those questions. Not because the outcomes don't matter. They do. But asking about them is not within your power. It is across the line. And every hour spent there is an hour stolen from the territory where you can actually do something. The loop is not analysis. It is not diligence. It is an attempt to control what cannot be controlled, dressed up in the clothes of careful thinking. This is not a story about one man and one job offer. It is a story about what the mind does when it cannot tolerate not knowing. Most of us have been there. Maybe not with a career decision, but with a medical result that hadn't arrived yet. A relationship that had gone quiet in a way that felt significant. A conversation with a parent or a partner or a friend. One that ended without resolution and kept replaying in the hours after. A situation at home that could tip either direction and no way to know which. The specifics vary. The structure is almost always the same. The mind encounters uncertainty. Not abstract uncertainty, real uncertainty, the kind attached to something it cares about. And instead of sitting with that uncertainty, the mind reaches for movement. Thought as motion, analysis as the illusion of progress, asking one more person, running one more scenario, revisiting one more angle, not because a new angle has appeared, but because forward motion, even circular motion, is easier than stillness. We call this worry, or anxiety, or more casually, overthinking. We frame it as a thinking problem, as though the issue were the amount of thinking, or the quality of it, or the direction it keeps going. But Epictetus would name it something different. He would call it a confusion about the line, because what drives the loop is not thought, it is the need to control an outcome that hasn't been decided yet. The thinking is just the method. The fuel is something older, a resistance to powerlessness, a refusal, quiet but persistent, to accept that some things are simply not ours to determine. And there is a particular ego investment underneath that refusal. To stop thinking, to set the question down before it resolves, feels in that moment like giving up, like negligence, like not caring enough about something that matters. We have been taught, in countless small ways, that effort equals responsibility, that the person who worries is the person who takes things seriously, that the loop is proof we care. But the loop is not proof of care. It is proof of a boundary crossed. We cannot think our way into certainty about the future. We never could. The loop does not move us closer to an answer. It just keeps us from sitting still long enough to recognize that the answer we're looking for isn't ours to have yet. There is something quieter available on the other side of that recognition. Not resolution. Not certainty finally arriving. Not a guarantee that the right choice has been made, or that things will unfold well. Just the capacity to put the question down, to stop gripping, to turn the attention back toward the territory that was always yours, the values, the judgment, the choice that can actually be made, and release the rest. Not because the rest doesn't matter, but because you were never going to get it by looping. Epictetus didn't teach indifference. That is the most common misreading of Stoic thought, that caring less is the answer. It isn't. The practice he described is almost the opposite of detachment. It is full engagement with what is genuinely yours, combined with a clear-eyed release of what isn't. Care fully. Choose carefully. Then let the outcome go. That sounds simple. It is not. It requires something most of us find genuinely difficult, the willingness to act without knowing how it ends. To make a real choice, one that reflects your values and your best understanding, and then step back from the need to control what follows. To trust that you can respond well to whatever arrives, without needing to have predicted it in advance. The release is not passivity, it is clarity about where your power actually lives. The man eventually made his decision. He accepted the offer. Not because the loop had finally produced an answer. It hadn't. Not because someone had said the right thing, or because a new piece of information had tipped the balance. None of that happened. What changed was simpler. He stopped trying to reach past the line and turned his attention back to what he actually knew. what the work asked of him, what he valued, what kind of person he wanted to be in the choosing. The loop didn't vanish immediately. Loops rarely do, but it quieted. The way background noise quiets when you stop straining to hear through it. The mind still moved, but the urgency drained out of the movement. Because he had stopped feeding the loop the only thing that keeps it running, the belief that certainty is one more round away. That if you just go around one more time, something new will finally appear. It won't, but the steadiness that comes from accepting that, from choosing well and releasing what follows, that is available. It has always been available. It just requires putting something down first. Overthinking is not a thinking problem. It is a control problem, and a quietly human one. The mind running in circles, trying to grip what it was never meant to hold. There is a difference between a mind that is working and a mind that is gripping. Working looks like bringing your attention to what you know, making a choice with the information available, then moving. Gripping looks like circling the same question past the point where more thinking helps, reaching for a certainty that keeps retreating. Staying in motion not because it's useful, but because stopping feels like surrender. Epictetus drew a line, not to limit human effort, but to protect it. To say, here is where your power ends, and beyond it. Spending yourself on the unholdable is not wisdom, it is suffering without purpose. That line is not comfortable to accept. Because accepting it means putting something down. It means sitting with the open loop and not filling it. It means trusting that you can act well without knowing how it ends. But there is something on the other side of that acceptance. A kind of steadiness that overthinking never produces. Quiet, not dramatic. Available not because the uncertainty resolved itself, but because you stopped trying to resolve it ahead of its time. The future will arrive without your permission. And you, with whatever you carry, with whatever you've chosen, will be there when it does. That has always been enough. It still is.